Last time we came up to chapter 20 of Numbers, and we saw a few things. One of the things that we saw was the privilege of the priest. Then we saw the privileges of the Levites, and how even the Levites had to pay tithes. So the Levites were supposed to receive tithes from all of Israel, but even from that tithe, they were expected to pay tithe to God. So, and they were the attitude that should be there is to give the best to God. So that was the attitude that God wanted among the people. Even among the best, God must be given the best out of it all. Then we passed quickly through chapter 19 about water of purification, which we had covered earlier, about a red heifer being burnt to ashes and using that to cleanse a person. Then we came to chapter 20. We saw that it is almost to the end of the 40 years. The first generation has almost died, passed away, and the second generation is about to enter the land and the problems they are facing. So again, they face problem of water. So, and they complain. And this time God tells Moses to speak to the rock and water will flow out. But Moses struck the rock. So we saw what it meant, what symbolism was there in that action. So we saw the verse from First Corinthians, where Paul said that a spiritual rock followed the Israelites through the wilderness. And there is a Jewish tradition that says that an actual rock followed the Israelites and provided them with water. So we saw that striking the rock, that rock we saw in First Corinthians, that rock was Christ. So striking the rock was symbolized crucifixion. So the second time when God told Moses to command to the rock, he did not want Moses to strike the rock or hit the rock. He just wanted him to speak, okay, to symbolize the lesson that we only have to ask and we shall receive. But Moses was angry with the people. He did not obey God fully. And God says, because of unbelief in your heart. Okay, so even at that stage, a person like Moses who talked with God face to face had this problem of unbelief. Okay, so he struck the rock. And that is when we see in the New Testament, in the light of New Testament, when we see that striking the rock is crucifixion, then striking the rock again is crucifying Christ again. So the New Testament says that such a person cannot be brought to salvation and cannot enter into the presence of God, will not enter into heaven. That was the idea. So since the symbolism in Moses' action crucified Christ again, God also gave Moses a punishment which symbolized the actual reality of what a person will experience if they crucified Christ again. God did not allow Moses to enter the promised land. So the punishment was also symbolic of what the reality would be of compared to what it was a shadow of the punishment of what somebody would experience if they crucified Christ again. So that was where we stopped. And going further in that time, in that portion again, uh, one thing we need to remember is Moses spent 40 years in the desert leading and preparing the people to enter the promised land. But in the end, he himself could not enter. So let's read First Corinthians chapter 9, verse 27. First Corinthians chapter 9, verse 27.
But I keep under my body and bring it unto subjection, lest that by any means, when I have preached to others, I myself should be a castaway.
So Paul himself had this fear that at the end of everything, he himself might not enter into the presence of God. That is a very real possibility. And Paul acknowledges that. And we see that in the life of Moses. 40 years in the desert, growing up, he knew that he had to, get the people of Israel out of bondage. That's why he went out and killed the Egyptian, and then he left everything. He ran away and spent 40 years in the tending sheep in the desert, then went back to palace. 40 years led the people through their rebellions, grumblings, seeing the mighty miracles of God, talking to God face to face. All these things he did. But at the very end, he could not enter the promised land. So the important thing that we need to remember is that we need to be obedient all the way till the end. We need to be obedient all the way till the end. So what we have is an assurance from God. Can we read Jeremiah 29, verse 11?
For I know the thoughts that I think toward you, said the Lord, thoughts of peace and not of evil, to give you an expected end.
To give you an expected end. Moses had an unexpected end. Moses was not expecting that. Okay, that was not what he was expecting. But God promises us that as long as we walk with him, okay, he is able to give us an expected end. Okay, so it's important to remember that we need to be obedient all the way until the end. That is something that we learn from this incident at the waters of Meribah. Now, going further, chapter 20, if we come, we'll go through verse 14 to 21. Okay, this is an incident where now the Israelites are passing through on the way to the promised land. Now they come to a country or nation of Edom. Edom is uh, the descendants of Esau, Jacob's twin brother. So Israel and Edom are technically brother nations. Okay, they are brother nations. Okay, so they come to that border and they send a request. Let's read chapter 14, verse 14 onwards. Numbers chapter 20, verse 14 onwards.
And Moses sent messengers from Kadesh unto the king of Edom. Thus saith thy brother Israel, thou knowest all the travel that hath befallen us. How our fathers went down into Egypt, and we have dwelt in Egypt a long time, and the Egyptians vexed us and our fathers. And when we cried unto the Lord, he heard our voice, and sent an angel, and hath brought us forth out of Egypt. And behold, we are in Kadesh, a city in the uttermost of thy border. Let us pass, I pray thee, through thy country. We will not pass through the fields or through the vineyards, neither will we drink of the water of the wells. We will go by the king's highway. We will not turn to the right hand nor to the left until we have passed thy borders. And Edom said unto him, thou shalt not pass by me, lest I come out against thee with the sword. And the children of Israel said unto him, we will go by the highway, and if I and my cattle drink of thy water, then I will pay for it. I will only, without doing anything else, go through on my feet. And he said, thou shalt not go through. And Edom came out against him with much people and with a strong hand. Thus Edom refused to give Israel passage through his border, wherefore Israel turned away from him.
So it may look like, so Edom is not allowing Israel to pass through uh, their country. Now, within very few verses, Moses gives a very short, in a short way, a big history, their complete history. How they went to Egypt, how they became slaves, how God rescued them, and where they are right now. So Moses gives a very quick history of their background, and he says, "Just let me go through. I will pay even for the water that I drink." Uh, so, so they were willing to be very, very quiet. They were willing not to trouble Edom at all. They just wanted to go through, but Edom does not allow. Now, if we look at all the other wars that Moses and the Israelites fought, we would have thought that when Edom came out, they should have fought a war and they should have taken over. But we see Israel turning around. So it came because God told them to do so. It is written in Deuteronomy chapter 2, verse 4. Can we read that? Deuteronomy chapter 2, verse 4.
And command thou the people, saying, Ye are to pass through the coast of your brethren, the children of Esau, which dwell in Seir, and they shall be afraid of you. Take ye good heed unto yourselves thereof.
Is that all? Just one second. Deuteronomy chapter 2, verse 4.
Do you want me to read chapter 5? I mean,
No, not chapter 5.
2 verse 4.
Yeah, sorry, verse 5. Yeah, sorry.
meddle not with them, for I will not give you of their land, no, not so much as a foot breadth, because I have given Mount Seir unto Esau for a possession.
So God gives them the instructions. Okay. You will not trouble them. You will not fight with them. You will not cause them any kind of trouble. Okay. So that is why Israel turned around. Otherwise, Israel, if we look at the general trend that they have been, if they are opposed, they go through, they have a war, they win, and they go through. But here, Israel got an instruction not to go. So now Israel has to go through a longer route. So they can't go through Edom, which would have been a straight path for them. Now they had to go around the country. So they start on that journey. So that is one incident. In the same chapter, verse 23 to 29, we see that Aaron dies in this chapter. Okay. So again, the reason for Aaron's death is written, God says in verse 24, the time has come for Aaron to join his ancestors in death. He will not enter the land I am giving the people of Israel, because the two of you rebelled against my instructions concerning the water at Meribah. So Aaron could have also entered the promised land, but he dies at this place. He dies because he rebelled against God, or he did not follow God's instruction, and therefore he has to die at this place. He cannot enter the promised land. And how old was Aaron when he died? He was 123 years old. Okay. So we know Moses was 120 years old. Aaron was 3 years older than Moses, but his age is written in Numbers chapter 33. Can we read Numbers chapter 33, verse 37 to 39? Numbers chapter 33, verse 37 to 39.
And they removed from Kadesh and pitched in Mount Hor in the edge of the land of Edom, and Aaron the priest went up into Mount Hor at the commandment of the Lord and died there in the 40th year after the children of Israel were come out of the land of Egypt in the first day of the 5th month. And Aaron was 123 years old when he died in Mount Hor.
He was 123 years old. He was an old man. But if we think about it, if they had obeyed God, this was not the time for Aaron to die. This was not his time to die. But he died because he did not obey God in certain previous matters. So many things that happen. Now he's 123 years old. They have been going in the wilderness for 40 years. It looks very logical, natural that an old man died. Okay. But When we look behind these things that are happening, we realize that was not the time for his death. Okay, it became his time because of disobedience, not because it was the natural time in his body to die. So we must also be very careful and we must really introspect our lives where we have been obedient, where we have not been obedient, and how it affects our life, how it affects our future. We may not be, if we look in the natural ability, we may not be able to connect the dots. But if we look at things with our spiritual eyes, we will be able to connect the dots of why certain things are happening. For example, in the New Testament, Paul says to the children, children, obey your parents so that you may live long in this land, in the land. Okay, that you may have a good future, that you may live long in the land. Now, how does obeying parents and living long in the land are connected? Unless we see it with spiritual eyes, we will never be able to make the connections. Okay, we will not realize why we face certain troubles in our life because of certain disobediences in the past. Of all the painful life that out of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, Jacob had the most painful and life because he deceived his father with a piece of cloth. He was deceived by his children with a piece of cloth. Okay. So, and Jacob by then had changed so much, he could not see through that deception. He could not see through the deception of his children. But things happen that way. There are connections of why certain things happen. So we need to be spiritually, uh, uh, discerning to see how to understand the things that are happening. Now, going forward, we come to another incident which is quite familiar to us. It is the incident about the bronze serpent. Okay, so that is from verse 4 to 9 in chapter 21. Can we read those verses? Chapter 21, verses 4 to 9.
And they journeyed from Mount Hor by the way of the Red Sea to compass the land of Edom. And the soul of the people was much discouraged because of the way. And the people spake against Jesus, God, and against Moses. Wherefore have ye brought us up out of Egypt to die in the wilderness? For there is no bread, neither is there any water. And our soul loatheth this light bread. And the Lord sent fiery serpents among the people, and they bit the people, and much people of Israel died. Therefore the people came to Moses and said, we have sinned, for we have spoken against the Lord and against thee. Pray unto the Lord that he take away the serpents from us. And Moses prayed for the people. And the Lord said unto Moses, make thee a fiery serpent, and set it upon a pole, and it shall come to pass that everyone that is bitten, when he looketh upon it, shall live. And Moses made a serpent of brass and put it upon a pole, and it came to pass that if a serpent had bitten any man, when he beheld the serpent of brass, he lived.
So we know this story that now we know that Israel had to go around Edom. They had to go through a longer route, and because of that longer route, they became tired and they began to complain. And they complain that they don't like this manna. There is nothing to eat here. There is nothing to drink. Okay. And the Lord was annoyed, and God sent poisonous snakes among them. And the Bible calls them as fiery snakes. It's not because of their color, because once those snakes bit a person, it produced a very violent inflammation and pain. Okay. So, and people died because of the poison of these snakes, and they repented. It was not really a true repentance, but it was, anyways, they repented and they came to Moses and they asked him to pray. And Moses prayed, and God told Moses to make a replica of the snake, a bronze replica, put it on a pole, and whoever will look at this pole, at this snake, will live. That's the story. We know that. Now, certain things that I wanted to highlight is in verse 7, it says Moses prayed. Okay. So in prayer is the best means to bring deliverance in any situation. Okay. When Moses prayed, God gave him an answer and a remedy. Okay. So prayer is the best means. It should be the first means. It should not be the last resort. It should not be that I have done everything I can. Now, only thing I can do is pray. That's not how it should be. Prayer should be the first thing that we do, because in prayer, God will guide us and speak to us. He will bring deliverance either in through any fashion. God will speak to us through prayer and bring a deliverance in a situation. So Moses prayed and there was deliverance. Now, we know John 3:16, right? Everybody knows John 3:16. Okay, for God so loved the world that he gave his only son. But what is John 3:14 and 15? It is this incident that we just spoke about. Okay, let's read Gospel of John, chapter 3, verse 14 and 15.
And as Moses lifted up the serpent in the wilderness, even so must the Son of Man be lifted up, that whatsoever believeth in him should not perish, that whosoever believeth in him should not perish, but have eternal life.
So before Jesus says about the verse in John 3:16, he speaks about this incident in the book of Numbers. This is a very significant incident. So even if we look at it, uh, when the people were in trouble because of their sin of rebellion, the God's remedy was Jesus Christ. So the bronze serpent represented Jesus Christ. Okay, the bronze serpent that was lifted up represented Jesus Christ. So in everything, God's answer is through Jesus Christ. So, as it says that Moses lifted up the serpent in the wilderness, so must the Son of Man be lifted up. And Jesus compares himself to what happened in this incident. Now, the Bible does not say how the people had to look. The Bible does not say how close they should stand to the pole before they will be healed. The Bible does not say at what time of day or night they should look. The Bible does not say how clearly they should be able to see the bronze serpent before they will be healed. All that is needed is they need to look at that serpent with faith and they will be healed. Even if it is night, even if it is not clear, even if they are seeing faintly, okay, if they look at that serpent with faith, God would honor that faith and heal them. So it was not by the works of the people, it was not by the what they did, it was only by looking at the serpent that and with faith that they received their healing. Now, this is we see a lot of similarity between what happened and what happened to Jesus Christ. So we will look at some of this similarity and then I will end for today. Let's read Hebrews chapter 12, verse 1 to 3. Hebrews chapter 12, verses 1 to 3.
Wherefore, seeing we also are compassed about with so great a cloud of witness, let us lay aside every weight and the sin which doth so easily beset us, and let us run with patience the race that is set before us, looking unto Jesus, the author and finisher of our faith, who for the joy that was set before him endured the cross, despising the shame, and is set down at the right hand of the throne of God. For consider him that endureth such contradiction of sinners against himself, lest ye be wearied and faint in your minds.
So in verse 2, it says, looking only at Jesus. In other translation, we'll see, keep looking at Jesus. Okay. So in the Old Testament, the Israelites looked at the snake, got healed, and they went along their way. Okay. And they lived their life. But for us, we are told not to take our eyes off from Jesus. We have to keep on looking at Jesus. Every day we have to keep on looking at Jesus. And that's how we have to live our life. That's how we have to walk. Now, what happens if we don't keep looking at him? When in verse 3 it says, if we keep looking at him, verse 3 says, you will not grow weary and lose heart. Okay, so what happens if we don't look at him? We will grow weary and we will lose heart. We will become discouraged, and if we become too busy to come into his presence, we become too busy to pray, to read the Bible, to enter into his presence, to have a communion with him. The pressures of life will bring weariness, and discouragement will start to creep into our lives. So to avoid that, so that we would run our race faithfully, the writer in Hebrew says, keep looking at Jesus. So the Israelite looked at Jesus once and turned away, but a Christian can never take his eyes off from Jesus. He's always supposed to keep looking at Jesus. Now, the serpent was a symbol of sin. Christ became sin for us. 2 Corinthians chapter 5, verse 21. Can we read 2 Corinthians chapter 5, verse 21?
For he hath made him to be sin for us, who knew no sin, that we might be made the righteousness of God in him.
So Jesus Christ became sin for us. That is why the bronze, the thing on that pole was a bronze serpent. The serpent was a symbol of sin. Okay, so he completely became sin for us. He took our sins upon him, and he completely became sin. And that's what we see in that the reason why the pole had a bronze serpent and not some other symbol, but only the symbol of a serpent, was because Christ would become sin. Christ would completely become sin for us. And that's why the pole had the symbol of a serpent and not some symbol of an angel or some other signs and symbols. Okay, because it was representing what would happen to Christ when he would take away our sin. Now the serpent was lifted up on a pole, Jesus was lifted up on a cross. We can see this similarity. Other thing was, there was no other remedy given to Israelite for deliverance. There was no herb given, there was no tonic, there was no pilgrimage, there was no other requirement, there was no rest or running or anything or exercise. Nothing was told. The only remedy for their deliverance was that bronze serpent. Without that bronze serpent, they were sure to die. Okay, no matter what they did. Okay, but looking at that bronze serpent, they did not have to do anything else. Okay, they would live. In the same way, in Acts chapter 4, verse 12, let's read Acts chapter 4, verse 12. In the same way, we do not have any salvation outside of Jesus. If there's no Jesus, there's no salvation. Let's read Acts chapter 4, verse 12.
Neither is there salvation in any other, for there is none other name under heaven given among men, whereby we must be saved.
So there is no other name, there is no other person, there is no other thing that we can do to be saved. We cannot help God to be saved. Okay, salvation completely belongs to God. Okay, if there was any other way, Paul says, if there was any other way that we could have been saved, okay, then Christ died in vain. Okay, because there is no other way. Okay, Jesus is the only way to be saved. Secondly, Israelites needed faith to be healed. we also need faith to be healed. Okay, we also need faith to be saved. In Ephesians chapter 2, verse 8 and 9, it says, "For by grace you have been saved through faith, and this is not of yourself, it is the gift of God, not a result of work, so that no one may boast." So we can see this similarity. And I know we have heard many sermons on this, so we already know all these things, but we see the similarity between the bronze serpent that was lifted up in the wilderness and Jesus Christ who was lifted up on the cross. All right. Now, let's read 2 Kings chapter 18, verses 1 to 4. We see something interesting here. 2 Kings chapter 18, verses 1 to 4.
Now it came to pass in the 3rd year of Hoshea, son of Elah, king of Israel, that Hezekiah the son of Ahaz, king of Judah, began to reign. 25 years old was he when he began to reign, and he reigned 29 years in Jerusalem. His mother's name also was Abi, the daughter of Zechariah. And he did that which was right in the sight of the Lord, according to all that David his father did. He removed the high places and brake the image, and cut down the groves, and break in pieces the brazen serpent that Moses had made. For unto those days the children of Israel did burn incense unto it, and he called it Nehushtan.
So what we see here is the bronze serpent which Moses had made in the wilderness, which was a reason for the salvation and healing of the Israelites. The Israelites preserved that replica, that bronze serpent. And this incident that we are reading in 2 Kings is 800 years later. Okay. And in that, we can see that the bronze serpent is still there. Now people have started worshipping it. They are offering incense to it. And it has its own name. It's called Nehushtan. Okay, which simply means, I think, bronze serpent or something. But what God did as a good thing for Israel, Israel lost sight of it and made that thing into an idol. Okay. So God did something good for Israel. Israel lost focus of the intention behind it, the motive behind it, and they converted that good thing into an idol. And therefore, Hezekiah breaks it into pieces and he destroys it. So this bronze serpent was made by God's instruction. It was a remedy and a deliverance solution that God had given to Israelite to get healed. But now what we see is that it had become an idol in the lives of the people. They had started worshiping it. So we can see that thing also happening in our lives too. Okay. So we must be very aware of how idolatry works. We can make our leaders as idols. We can make our education as an idol. We can make our skill as an idol. We can make the customs and traditions and habits of our ministry as an idol, or forms of our worship as an idol. The way we worship in our country, that is the only way that we should be worshipped. God should be worshipped. Any other form of worship is wrong. Okay, so we can make a ministry into, or as an idol in our life, and it can become a stumbling block. We may lose focus as to why that custom, why that tradition came about, and why it was necessary for those group of people, and why it is not applicable in a different setting, or whatever it might be. We have to be very careful about what can become an idol in our life. Okay, what we have seen is what God gave, the bronze serpent. Okay, it would be one of the best, most excellent symbol of God's faithfulness and mercy and kindness that the people of Israel could remember God by and the things that God did. But they made it into an idol and it had to be destroyed. So if it happened to them, it can easily happen to us also. As we saw in the beginning of this book, that the New Testament writers quote extensively from Numbers to warn Christians about how they should walk in their Christian life. So this is one thing that we should also be very careful about. Now, the other thing that we should be careful, and this is not in the book of Numbers, is that the Israelites had something called as a teraphim, okay? Or it is called as a household god, okay? Let's read 2 Kings chapter 23, verse 24. 2 Kings chapter 23, verse 24.
Moreover, the workers with familiar spirits, and the wizards, and the images, and the idols, and all the abominations that were spied in the land of Judah and in Jerusalem, did Josiah put away, that he might perform the words of the law which were written in the book of Hilkiah, the priest found in the house of the Lord.
So what Josiah did was he did away the mediums, the spiritists, and the household gods. Okay, so this household idols there's a word called as teraphim. Okay, in Genesis chapter 31, verse 30, we read about the incident where Laban chases after Jacob, and he says there's something. Rachel had stolen some of the idols from Laban's house and kept with her. Laban realizes that and he comes in search of it. So he asks Jacob this question. Now you have indeed gone away because you longed greatly for your father's house. But why did you steal my gods? Okay. So this is the household idol or household god. Household god is not the right translation in English. Okay. This is what is called as teraphim. So they are not gods, but they were considered as spirit of the ancestors. Okay. So these were created, this images were created to remember their ancestors, their forefathers. Okay. So like we may have photographs today in our homes, they created these small idols and it was not to be worshipped. It was not to for anything. It was just a memorial for their forefathers to remember them by. And when we read the Bible, we don't see in any place uh, any kind of opposition to that. Okay. But the opposition or the Bible, what the Bible condemns is that people began to consult this teraphims and use divination to foretell the future. So that is where, and it became an abomination to God. In Zechariah chapter 10, verse 2, it says, "For the household idols speak deception, and the diviners see an illusion." So the people started consulting these idols that they had created in their house, which was supposed to be a memorial for their forefathers to remember them. They started doing occultic practices and they started trying to find out the future from these idols. And, demons started using those things. There are different incidents, but the Israelites had something like this in their homes. Okay. And that's what we read in 2 Kings chapter 23, that Josiah did away with mediums, spiritists, and the household idols. He cleansed the land completely. So that cleansing was important. Now, what we see in these two incidents or two things that we are speaking about is the bronze serpent was a good thing, but it became an idol. Okay. This small idol that they were making was supposed to be a memorial, but it became an idol, a place for demonic doors to be opened. Okay. So something which was good turned bad. Okay. Because people did not, uh, you know, did not uh, follow God properly. So what we also need to remember is we have different things in our lives we need to be careful about. Okay. For example, what I see now is a great addiction to phones, to our mobile phones, to social media. Okay. It has the power to affect an entire generation. Okay. And it affects the heart and mind of children of entire generation is being molded by these videos. Okay. It's become a big medium. So when we become addicted to things like this, we need to really question, do we need a cleansing? How Josiah cleansed his own kingdom. Okay. Is this the reason why I am not able to hear God? Is this become the noise of the smartphone so loud that I can't hear the still small voice of God? Okay. So we probably would need a cleansing in our own lives as we see these two incidents of the bronze snakes and the teraphims. Okay. So may God bless us with this words.